What's up, Wizards? It's Dev, SBMTG, and Ziggy's here. He's behind my shoulder somewhere. We like it of magic, and it's Wilds of Eldraine, spoilers day, whatever it is. Tuesday of week 2, and yeah, I'm wearing the same shirt as yesterday. That's spoiler season for you, man. All I really do is look at new cards. That's my entire existence, but that's what we're here to do today, so let's look at about 30 new cards that Wizards dropped on us. And that's with me omitting like a few commons that I kind of thought were a little bootyish. But we'll get to eventually here in spoiler season, don't worry. That leaves the good stuff like Candy Grapple and Candy Trail to start off with. Candy Grapple, it's the card from Morrow's Teaser. It's 2 mana, 1 and a black for an instant with Bargain. Target creature gets -3/-3 till end of turn. If the spell was bargained, that creature gets -5/-5 until end of turn instead. Just a fine removal spell. It's just a nameless inversion if you don't do anything with it, which is fine. Not sure that it actually replaces too much. In Standard, we already have some really, really good 2 mana black removal that is close to unconditional. Infernal Grass basically is. So I'm not sure how much this is going to just go and replace day 1, but it does have that, destroy target Sheldred mode on it, so that's kind of nice. Candy Trail is just a single mana for an artifact. It's a food clue. Hey, when it enters the battlefield, you scry 2. You can pay 2 and tap it and sack it to gain 3 life and draw a card. Yet another card from Morrow's Teaser, the thing that has 2 artifact token types on it. Food Clue is the one that a lot of us guessed, so makes a lot of sense, but it's also kind of a nice card. Just a single mana for a scry 2, draw some cards, or draw a single card, gain some life a little bit later down the road. It ain't too bad, but I don't think it's going in too many decks day 1 or anything, but it's a nice little egg to crack every now and again. We got Unruly Catapult and the Ginger Brute reprint we all wanted. Let's go, but let's look at Catapult first. This is just 3 mana, 2 and a red for a 0/4 artifact creature. It's construct with Defender. You can tap it to deal a damage to each opponent, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you untap the Catapult. So it's a Thermo Alchemist, which is great, in my opinion at least. I'm just going to support my dude in all of his forms whenever I see him. So I like this card. I guess in Standard you could play a bunch of Alchemists if you wanted to. 8 Alchemists, plus Kessig Flame Breather if you wanted him too. So seems like a cool deck. Don't know how good it is, but again, I'm just going to like this card whenever I see it. And of course, Gingy's back. At first I was like, this is a common, this is pauper playable now, but apparently it's always been a common, so don't listen to me. But this is just 1 mana for a 1/1 haste. It's an artifact creature, it's a food and all that stuff. It's a food golem, actually. And you can pay 1, and it can't be blocked except by creatures with haste till end of turn. Of course, you can also food it. Trade it in for 2, tap, sack, gain life. But this was fun the last time it was in Standard. I don't know that it really established too much of a foothold, but it was a pretty sweet card. I'm not sure how much work it has to do this time around either, but there's already kind of a pseudo artifacts deck in Standard that actually gets a couple of pieces from this set, so maybe Ginger Brute will have some work, but we'll have to see about Ginger Brute. I support his presence. Everybody loves Gingy. But let's breach into the uncommons here and look at a couple of cards that care about how many creatures attack this turn. They're both kind of interesting. We got Witch Stalker Frenzy and Rowdy Research, but Frenzy is just 4 mana, 3 and a red for an instant. It costs 1 less to cast for each creature that attacked this turn, and it deals 5 damage to target creature. This one, you probably want to be the one attacking, you see, because even just 3 guys in your mono red deck seems easy. 3 dudes attack, and you can hit something for 5. Again, destroy target Sheldred is a pretty important mode on some of the removal in this set. So this looks okay, maybe sideboardy for mono red aggro in Standard. Not sure it goes too far beyond that, but hey, that's a slot in a big boy Standard deck. You're doing good. Rowdy Research is arguably worse and arguably better. I think it's the more interesting of these 2 cards. 7 mana, 6 and a blue for an instant. It costs 1 less to cast for each creature that attacked this turn, and you draw 3 cards. So I think on the red one, you want to be the one attacking, and maybe on this one, you want to have gotten attacked. I could see it working on offense, but if you're up against a creature-based deck and 4 guys attack you, and you can play a little bit of defense, hopefully those 4 dudes aren't all hitting you in the teeth. So hopefully you've got some defenses up against them. But again, 4 dudes attack you, and suddenly, again, this costing 3 is kind of appetizing. I don't know. It seems like an okay card, but I'm not sure it actually slots in anywhere. Let's look at 3 pretty important looking cards for the limited food deck here. We got Old Flitterfang, the good name, Experimental Confectioner, and Provisions Merchant. Now we'll look at Old Flitterfang first. These are kind of in order of how good I think they are, but Flitterfang Flitterfang. Flitterfang's at least neat. I just can't say his name right. 5 mana, 4 and a black for a 3/4 rat fairy. Creature types. He's legendary too. And he has flying. At the beginning of each end step, if a creature died this turn, create a food token. You can also pay 2 and a black and sack another creature or artifact to have Flitterfang, nailed it, get +2/+2 until end of turn. So really priced out. Like 5 mana to cast him, 3 mana to activate him. He's not going to see any standard play, but this is a cool little thing for the limited food decks to get a little bit of reach in the late game, have a way to convert their food into some sort of offense. And you see that a lot on the, Golgari food cards in limited in this set. I do think this is the worst of the cards on screen, but I do think it's probably going to win you a game or two in limited. It doesn't look horrible. Also, a quick note, this is like the 3rd legend in a year with the name Old Something. They just keep using that naming convention, and I liked it at first. Don't know how I feel about it anymore, but we'll move on to Experimental Confectioner. Love the name of this card. 3 mana, 2 and a black for a 2/3 human peasant. When it ETBs, you get a food token. Whenever you sack a food, create a 1/1 black rat creature token with creature can't block. Nice. Note too that on this card, as well as a lot of other food related cards, you don't have to sack it. Like, you don't have to pay mana, tap it, sack it to gain life. You don't have to sack it that way. Just anytime you sack a food in any way, you get a 1/1 black rat. It doesn't just trigger once a turn. I think that's kind of noteworthy. So again, this time, a way to kind of go wide on the board with your rat tokens instead of like old whatever his face is, Flitterfang, a second ago. He's a way to kind of use all your tokens to go tall, have an evasive dude to smash in for like 6 or 7 or whatever he does. So, but this, again, helps you go wide or create the tokens to sack for effects and stuff. Just a neat little card. I like a thing like this. But again, my favorite of these, if you're following along, must be Provisions Merchant. It is. It's 4 mana, 2 and 2 green for a 3/3 Beast Peasant. When it ETBs, you get a food token. When it attacks, you may sack a food. If you do, attacking creatures get +1/+1 and gain trample till end of turn. So the overrun effect in green in this set for limited is food related. This is really, really nice looking, man. Again, a way to convert those foods to offense. I wish the stats were a little bit better on this guy. 4 mana, 3/3 isn't the best thing in the world, but this is pretty incredible, especially if you like combine the rats and foods theme and you got a few rats on the table, you're going wide and you get in with this sack of food, bang. So I don't know, man. It looks kind of exciting for limited. Anytime I see +1/+1 in trample or plus anything in trample on a green card, I'm like, okay, this is how we break through in limited. And I think this guy is the way to do it, but you got to have some food laying around, which really shouldn't be too hard. I can see some non-food decks playing this guy, and he even gives you a food when he comes into play. So just a lot of cool things about this dude. Well, let's move on to Intrepid Truffle Snout, the Witch's Vanity, and Red Tooth Vanguard here. Now, Truffle Snout, this is actually pretty good. It's 2 mana, 1 and a green for a 3/1 boar, and whenever it attacks alone, you get a food token. But it's also got this adventure, Go Hog Wild. That's the name of a magic card now. 2 mana, 1 and a green for an instant. It's an adventure. Target creature gets +2/+2 till end of turn. So, okay, all right. You get a 2 mana, 3/1, which is a very common stat line in this set, it looks like. I feel like we keep seeing 2 mana, 3/1s in this set. And then the other side, little pump spell, add instant speed. I don't know, man. I think it's kind of okay for like a green stompy deck or something like that. So I kind of don't hate this at all. In fact, I think it's actually kind of a solid card. I kind of said that like I hate every card, which isn't true. As a matter of fact, I kind of over-like cards a lot of the time, and I think this might be one of those, but it is still some pig. That'll do. So we'll move on to the Witch's Vanity. 2 mana, 1 and a black for a saga. On chapter 1, you destroy target creature an opponent controls with mana value 2 or less. On chapter 2, you get a food token. And then on chapter 3, you create a Wicked Roll token attached to target creature you control. So yet another useful like 2 mana uncommon saga. We've seen like a ton of these in this set. And I do like that they're using this design space of like enchantments that you want to also be able to sacrifice for bargain and still get value off of. I think that sagas are like perfect for that design space. So I really like what they're doing with a lot of these. And this one's no different. I mean, it's a removal spell immediately, then food token. Then it really doesn't have to do much else. You can just kind of sack it. But a Wicked Roll token is also like kind of nice sometimes too. So just whatever. For 2 mana, I do like this initial investment. I'm not sure that it goes into standard or anything like that, but as an anti-aggro tool or something in sideboards, you could do a lot worse than this. Let's face it, you could probably do a little bit better too. So let's move on to Red Tooth Vanguard. 2 mana, 1 and a green for a 3/1 elf warrior with trample. There's that. 2 mana 3/1 stat line again. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 2. If you do, return Red Tooth Vanguard from your graveyard to your hand. If it came back to the battlefield, we might be talking, but even then I think it would just be like a weak Kami of Transience in some ways, and Transience goes back to your hand. You know, but I think that just for it to be free for an enchantment to come back to your hand is better, even though the conditions are slightly different, right? So I don't know, man. I don't know that this actually goes anywhere in standard, but later on, I'm going to freak out about like a card that's actually remarkably similar to this. This is almost a budget version of my favorite card of the day, so I at least wanted to give it some spotlight. We're almost done with the uncommons, but I want to look at 3 more, starting with a couple of artifacts that look kind of cool to me, like Collector's Vault and Arietti's Tempting Apple. We're getting a lot of Morrow teaser cards today in the Apple, right? But let's look at Collector's Vault first. This is 2 mana for an artifact. You pay 2, tap it, you draw a card and then discard a card, and you also create a treasure token. Okay, so this is going to eat 2 turns in standard, and I imagine if you're on the draw and you play this on turn 2, activate it on turn 3, and then say go, you will probably die in some situations. Not all, but there are a lot of decks that are just going to run you down if you want to play this card on curve. So I don't love that it costs so much. It costs its casting cost to activate, man. Come on. But like later in the game, or if you have a couple of mana laying around, like this could actually be good. I like that Celestis style. You draw the card first. It's a loot, not a rummage. You draw the card first, then you discard a card. That's always like infinitely better in my mind. It is decent for reanimator decks and stuff that wants to play around. It's a ramp thing, I guess. Like I like this a little bit, but I do think it's a step too slow. And yeah, I get that you can sack it to bargain and stuff after it's created a treasure token, sack the treasure token for bargain and all that. Yeah, it's cool, but I think sometimes even in limited, when the best thing you can say about a card in this set is like, oh, you sack it to bargain, then like, I just think it's important to remember that you have options in the game of Magic the Gathering. So we'll look at Arietti's Tempting Apple here. This is really interesting. It's 4 mana for a legendary food, and when it enters the battlefield, you gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap it, it gains haste till end of turn. You can pay 2 and tap the apple to sacrifice it and gain 3 life. The apple you're sacking here, not the creature you nabbed. You can also pay 2, tap it, and sacrifice again the apple to have an opponent lose 3 life. Okay, so that's kind of a neat little wrinkle. First of all, it's a food that you can sack for life, but you can also poison your opponent with it, I guess is the flavor here, and bolt them, which is kind of neat. But the cool thing about this is that it's a threaten effect. You know, like this is an effect that we very often see in red, to the point that it's more or less exclusive to red in this day and age. We used to see more, you know, gain control till end of turn in blue. Now we just see like gain control of the dude forever in blue a lot more often, but there used to be more of that flavor in blue, I promise you, of like grab the guy till end of turn and then give him back, you know, politely. But again, this is mostly a red effect nowadays, but now like in limited, green decks can play this effect, white decks can play this effect. It's just real. Blue can do it again. So that's just really neat. And there's a few different ways to sacrifice stuff in this environment, right? If you just grab like a normal creature with this, you can't sack it. But if you grab like a nice juicy token or something, sack it a bargain, feeling good. So just a really cool card, man. 4 mana is kind of a lot, but the ability for any limited deck to play a threaten effect is going to create some interesting layers. Well, let's finish off these uncommons with, I think, just clear cut the best uncommon of the day, and that's Hearth Elemental. 6 mana, 5 and a red for a 4/5 elemental that costs X less to cast, where X is the number of cards in your graveyard that are instants, sorceries, or adventures. So what's the adventure half of this? It's Stoke Genius, 2 mana, 1 and a red for a sorcery. Discard your hand, then draw 2 cards. Okay, so I guess if you go first and then you play a land, on turn 2 you play another land, and then you play this. Discard 5 instants and sorceries. And then next turn, you can play this for just a single mana. It's never going to work that way, but I guess you could play Consider on turn 1 to make it a little bit easier to get that line going. In other formats, you have like Faithless Looting turn 1, and that makes the line super easy. So I don't know, man. It seems pretty good. I, of course, have to point out that if you have no cards in your hand, this is 2 mana for draw 2. What a rate. And then like later on in the game, what a top deck. If you do get this, no other cards in your hand, top of your library, you'll play this. And then it's very likely you'll just play the creature half for 1 or 2 mana right after. So that seems kind of great. You know, even if you have to discard a card or 2 to this, if it's stuff you ain't using anyway or can access later, I guess you really don't have too much of a problem with it. 2 mana for 2 cards is fine most of the time. And then later on, I get a 4/5 that I'm only going to pay like 1 mana for ideally. But even if I pay 2 or 3, it depends on the game state. again, could be totally fine. I really like this guy. I feel like he could have been rare, but he's not. That's good. It's good that he's not. But yeah, am I just nuts on this one? This is by far, in my opinion at least, the best uncommon of the day, and I don't even think it's close. Let's go ahead and break into the rares. We made it, everybody. But let's start with 3 that I don't think are quite as good as some of the other ones we'll look at today. Sorry, just being honest with you, but at least 2 of these look pretty good in limited. So there's that, if nothing else. We got Rankle's Prank, Ogre Chitterlord, and Malevolent Witch Kite. Now, Prank is 4 mana, 2 and 2 black for sorcery. Choose 1 or more. Each player discards 2 cards. Each player loses 4 life, or each player sacrifices 2 creatures. Oh, okay, cool. So for an extra mana, I get a Mind Rot that also makes me pitch cards. Yeah, kind of pass on this. I get that it's versatile, and I also get that on the right board state, it's 4 mana for a 2-for-1, but I still just don't care for it. I guess theoretically it could also do like the last 4 damage to the opponent or something. So like, I don't know, but it's definitely not the new Invoke Despair or anything. Unless it is, but I severely doubt it. So let's move on to Ogre Chitterlord here. Did I say Chatterlord? It's Chitterlord. It's 6 mana, 4 and 2 red for a 6/5 Ogre Warrior with Menace. Whenever Chitterlord enters the battlefield or attacks, get 2 1/1 black rat creature tokens with the creature can't block. Then, if you control 5 or more rats, each rat you control gets +2/+0 till end of turn. That's big rats. Big boys right there, rats. Rats on Crack Attack. It's a reference no one will get, but in any case, this is almost Siege Gang Commander, like right, so close, not really. It's just a big guy that creates some dudes when it comes into play, and my squirrel brain is always like, a Siege Gang Commander. No, it's not really. But this is a lot of mana. It's so much mana. Not sure it works in Standard, but if you have enough rats, that is fair amount of value the turn it comes into play. I don't hate that about it, but I really don't see it working out in any format other than limited, where it kind of had to be rare because it's just kind of gross in this limited rats deck. I am trending more towards wanting to play that deck at pre-release every day. Now, Malevolent Witch Kite, a little bit like Chitterlord, they both kind of look like welcome deck rares or something like that, but they look okay. Witch Kite is 6 mana, 4 and 2 black for a 5/4 Dragon Warlock, neat, with flying. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice any number of artifacts, enchantments, and or tokens, and draw that many cards. So it has super bargain. That's kind of neat. Sacrifice 2 things, draw 2 cards. Even sack 1 thing, draw a card. Might give this guy like enough ETB value to be somewhat relevant, but nah, man, he's 6 mana and Standard. Come on, I don't really think he's going to work out too well there. But again, in limited, big fat flyer is going to draw you a couple of cards when he comes into play. Sack a saga, sack a food, who cares? So I do like it there. I think it's kind of bomby in limited, but outside of your pre-release, no, probably a bulk rare. Let's move on to Regal Bunnycorn, Feral Encounter, and Food Fight. Now, Bunnycorn, yeah, it is on screen with 2 other cards, while my face is not on the screen. That does give you some indication of how I feel about this card. I think a lot of people really, really like it, but I'm kind of cautious on it. It's 2 mana, 1 and a white for a star Rabbit Unicorn. Good creature types. And its PT are each equal to the number of non-land permanents you control. So it's a 2 mana 1/1. If you're doing it right, it's a 2 mana 5/5. Fairly early in the game. I mean, you go 1 drop into this, that's 2 mana 2/2. You play Adeline on turn 3, you swing in, it's 2 mana 4/4 on turn 3. Let's kind of go. Like, I could see this being a pretty sweet little card, but this is one of those that has to prove it to me because, like, it's not Tarmogoyf or anything like that, or at least I'm making all these bold statements in this video. What if it is the next Tarmogoyf? I don't know. But I do think that it just gets bodied by sweepers. It gets bodied by any form of removal, especially early game. Your opponent can even cut it down pretty easily. So it's just a vanilla guy. Like, even when it gets to 6/6, like, yeah, you paid 2 mana for a 6/6, but it's just it doesn't have trample or any kind of evasive ability or hexproof or ward or just nothing. And I'm sorry to not be that impressed by this, but just like, it's just a big guy. It does have to kind of prove itself in the ring to me. I think it might be nice for those like green-white tokens decks, those Naya tokens decks, to have something that goes really tall this early in the game. That's cool, but is it enough of a piece for those decks to really break through into the Standard meta? Again, we'll have to wait and see. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm just not sure about this one. But I want to be. I really want to like this card. But we can't just talk about one card all day as much as I want to. I can make a whole video about Bunnycorn my feelings, but Feral Encounter is 2 green mana for a sorcery. Look at the top 5 of your library. You may exile a creature card from among them, but the rest on the bottom in a random order. You may cast the exiled card this turn. At the beginning of the next combat phase this turn, target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to up to 1 target creature you don't control. So it's a bite effect for 2 mana at sorcery speed, and it's very green intensive, but it also, if you got enough mana open, get you a dude. And like sometimes you're just going to cast this because you need a removal spell. And you don't care if you can cast the thing you get off the top of your library. But starting at like 4 to 6 mana, you have enough mana to both cast this and get something pretty swell off the top of your library. Swell? Yeah, something pretty good off the top of your library. And obviously you have more than that. You're doing really, really well. Now, Food Fight over here, I like because it kind of takes off some of the constraints that have revolved around these last couple of cards about like whether or not they're good in standard. Is Food Fight good in standard? Probably not. But is it a cool card? Yeah, coolest card on the screen. It's 2 mana, 1 and a red for an enchantment. Artifacts you control have 2. Sacrifice this artifact. It deals damage to any target equal to 1 plus the number of permanents named Food Fight you control. So 2 mana, sack an artifact. It is always going to do at least 2 damage because that's how math works. But if you have another Food Fight and play your bolting stuff, right? If you have all 4 Food Fights and play, you're doing 5 damage. And so like, I want to live that dream somewhere, you know, at some stream or another. We're going to try and make that work. But even if you only have like the 1 Food Fight in play, that's still sack an artifact for a shock. Again, I'm not sure how good that actually is in standard. Probably not amazing, but I want to at least try it. I've always loved stuff like this, man. Just anything like the Goblin Bombardment and everything in between. So I'm going to at least try this thing out in standard. Probably going to be one of the cards I like, but that is no indication as to whether or not it's going to actually be an important standard card. I kind of doubt that, but I'm going to like it. I get to like it. Let's look at Lady of Laughter next. This is 5 mana, 3 and 2 white for a 4/5 Fairy Noble with flying and celebration. At the beginning of your end step, if 2 or more non-land permanents enter the battlefield under your control this turn, why don't you draw a card? That's a pretty good line of text right there. And I think this has the potential to go beyond limited, but I'm not super convinced, right? I will say something about these like 5 and 6 mana, you gotta have a couple of things into the battlefield, blah, blah, blah. Something I kind of like about them is that you can play planeswalkers that create creatures before them, right? And then when you play something like this, you just make a creature with the planeswalker, and then suddenly 2 things enter the battlefield. This triggers, you're feeling good, you draw a card. So in a way, you could argue that these are easier to trigger on curve if they cost more and you're specifically playing planeswalkers in your deck or some other free way to generate tokens on an artifact or something. So, you know, you could make this work out, but I'm not sure that I'm the biggest fan of the stat line. I mean, 4/5 flying could be worse, but still, draw a card more or less every turn. You can make this work. And in Commander, I think it's worth noting that you can make this work like pretty easily. Again, any combination of planeswalkers, artifacts, enchantments, and other stuff that triggers when stuff comes into play or whatever. Very easy to draw an extra card off of this every turn. So I think it's somewhat powerful there, even at 5 mana. But in Standard, I think it's like on the cusp. It's close. Well, let's check out Wildwood Mentor next. This is 3 mana, 2 and a green for a tree folk. That's a 1/1. Whenever a token enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Mentor. Whenever Wildwood Mentor attacks, another targeting attacking creature gets +X/+X till end of turn, where X is Mentor's power. Okay, now we're talking a little bit. Now, this costs more than Regal Bunnycorn we were just looking at a second ago, but it is yet another tool for these green-white tokens decks to kind of go tall rather than wide, and I like that this is also going to give plus whatever to something else that's attacking, probably something relatively small, right? One way or the other, just a cool little thing, man. Whenever you get any token, throw a counter on him, he's gonna be like 5/5 relatively quickly. Just over the space of a couple of turns, he could be 6/6, and then he's attacking. He's giving this huge boost to somebody. I like this guy, even though the snowball starts like relatively small. It gets huge quickly. But let's move on. Why not? To Restless Vinestalk, the final creature land in the set. This is the Simic one that ETB's tapped and taps for blue or green. Now, for 3, a green, and a blue, 5 mana, you can pay that. And then till end of turn, Vinestalk becomes a 5/5 green and blue plant creature with trample that's still a land. Whenever it attacks, up to one other target creature has base power and toughness 3/3 till end of turn. So you can use it to shrink their big guy, get this big dude through, or you can like make one of your small guys bigger. It's not too bad, but this is the biggest creature land, which I think is kind of neat, but also as a result, has a consequence, costs the most to activate. 5 mana, effectively having to have like 6 lands out most of the time to activate this is so much. You're probably putting all your shields down in order to activate this, so really paying a price to do so. But I mean, it's a 5/5 it's a creature land that's a 5/5. It's definitely worth noting, man. And you're like Sultai control deck or something. You got your opponent shut down and locked out. Suddenly you're taking giant chunks out of them with just your creature land. So it seems okay. Well, let's move on to Sleep Cursed Fairy here. SCF is just a single blue mana for a 3/3 fairy wizard with flying and ward too, huh? Well, you see, it enters the battlefield tapped with 3 stun counters on it. You can pay 1 and a blue to untap it, but it won't actually untap if it's still got stun counters on it. You just remove a stun counter. So it's one of these. It's one of these like super cheap 3/3s. However, ... So I think this is kind of cool. I mean, within the space of a couple of turns, it's going to end up untapping, especially if you have extra mana. But I don't think you necessarily have to have extra mana. I really don't. I think, first of all, there's a bunch of spells in this set that care whether or not you have a fairy in play, just in general. And we've been looking for good like 1-drop fairies to enable those spells. And this is a good one, man, even though it won't untap for a couple of turns, or a few really at the start of the game. I think it gets untapped like turn 4 or something. So it comes into play. Turn 1 has 3 stun counters on it. Turn 2, 2 stun counters. Turn 3. Okay, so it untaps on turn 5 if you don't put any mana into it. Ooh, not as good. But again, still. It enables all these things that just want you to have a fairy in play. And I think this is, again, a 4-of fairy in the fairies deck just to make sure you can slap something on the table early in the game. So I do like it there. But aside from that, I'm just like not super sure about it. But anytime you see a 1-mana 3/3 flyer, like pay attention is all I'm saying. But hey, if you like 1-mana blue creatures, here's another one you ought to see. This is Elusive Otter, a single blue mana for a 1/1 otter. Love it. It's got prowess, and creatures with power less than its power cannot block it. It's also got Grove's Bounty, a sorcery adventure for X and a green. You distribute X +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures that you control. Okay, let's go. Man, just a single mana for a prowess guy and another ability, kind of a reverse skulky thing is what it's trying to do over here. But that's actually really, really slick, man. If it gets, you can make it get fairly big really early. It only costs a single mana to cast. So just the 1/1 prowess is kind of okay, a little bit by itself in and of itself. But it also has that extra ability to make it harder to block. And this other spell, this spell over here, Go Hog Wild. It's not called Go Hog Wild. I just still can't get over there's a adventure called that. But anyway, the adventure half of this, if you have, a few mana in the later game, you rip it off the top of your library, then suddenly that's fine. I don't even really mind the sorcery speed on this, but you got like 4 or 5 mana laying around. You don't mind pumping into it. Like, geez, let's freaking go, man. Also worth noting that this targets a bunch of your creatures in blue-green. Right? So like maybe the Venerated Rot Priest deck or something like that. It might be like halfway decent in, but might be hard to sneak it into that deck. It's pretty tight on slots, but still at least worth noting. This is yet another thing that targets a bunch of your guys. That deck is always looking for those. So, but yeah, if that deck needs to punch through for actual combat damage or something like that late, this will help it do that both on the creature half and on the spell half. So really, really cool stuff about this card, man. I think there's like a Simic aggro deck like sort of coming together that I'm not sure is very good, but at least looks really fun and different to play. But here we are, top 3 cards of the day, barring any reloads, obviously. Going to show my face and everything. Excited about these ones. Starting with the Iron Crag, man. This is just 2 mana for a legendary artifact. You tap it for a colorless. Doesn't matter what it does beyond that in standard, to be honest, but it does do more stuff. Whenever a legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may have the Iron Crag become a legendary equipment artifact named Everflame, Hero's Legacy. If you do, it gains equip 3, and equipped creature gets +3/+3 and loses all other abilities for some reason. I just kind of want to go nuts about the flavor of this card for like 5 minutes before I actually talk about how good the card really is in standard, because it is, but I'm not going to do that. All I'm going to say is like, why does the creature lose all the other abilities? What's the flavor over there. I get that it's Excalibur, Sword in the Stone, but maybe Excalibur's really heavy, so you lose all your other abilities. But if you can pull the sword from the stone, it's not heavy to you. So why do you lose all your other abilities? It's just a thing in the story. I don't know, man. It bugs me just a little bit. Why do I have to lose all my other abilities? But let's talk about the actual function of the card in a format like Standard, where it is a 2-mana rock. 2-mana rock in Standard. No drawback aside from the legendary, obviously, but I guess it kind of, if it becomes the equipment, it changes its name, which means that you can play another Ironcrag, which is called the Ironcrag. And they have different names, so it doesn't legend rule itself. So that's kind of neat. But yeah, I guess the one real drawback is that you can't like double Mind Stone or double Felwar Stone in Standard, but just being able to play a rock, any deck, play a rock on turn 2 in Standard is something we have not had access to in a really long time. I just didn't think they were like ever going to do this again, but here we are. 2-mana rock, fairly unconditional. It's not like Orb of Dragonkind or some garbage or whatever. It's 2-mana rock, literally any deck can play. It's not just for squirrels or whatever. It's just completely unconditional mana every turn for only a 2-mana investment. Okay, that's impactful is all I'm going to really say about this. That's a very impactful card. Again, we just haven't had this in Standard in a really very long time. So I'm going to kind of batten down the hatches, kind of wait in the eye of the storm and see what happens. But I do think this is probably going to be one of the better cards from the set. I'm not saying every deck is going to start playing it day one or anything. And the ramp decks don't necessarily have to play it. They already have better ramp than this. So like there are decks that won't play it, but there are definitely going to be decks that do. And this is a signpost for a mid-range format right here. When you give us something like this, Shelly on turn 3 is a real thing now that it's kind of easy to do. So I guess you don't want to play 4 copies of this in your deck because it's legendary, right? So you don't get it on turn 2 every time. And that's, right there again. There's it being legendary is a real drawback, but it's still here. I did not think this would be here, and it is. Make no mistake, this is easily one of the more impactful cards in the set. But so are the other 2 cards we're looking at today. These both look really good, but we're going to look at Questing Druid first. This is a green and a colorless for a 1/1 human druid. Whenever you cast a spell that's white, blue, black, or red, put a +1/+1 counter on Questing Druid. It's a Quirion Dryad. It's a good, I like that card. But it's also got Seek the Beast on it. This is 1 and a red for an instant. It's an instant. Exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until your next end step, you may play those cards. Okay, so not only is it Quirion Dryad, that's kind of exciting enough, but it's stapled to a really good version of this like red card draw effect. This is 2 cards for 2 mana. We just talked about that being pretty decent earlier. This is instant speed. If you play this during your opponent's combat step or end step or whatever, you're feeling okay. So I cannot believe they made this card instant speed. And I think that instantly makes it kind of one of the better looking cards like in the whole set. I don't know how many 4 and 5 color mid-range decks, I don't know if we can actually do that and make it work in Standard, but even just in like a Gruul deck that's really heavy on the red and fairly light on the green, so you trigger the creature half of this as often as possible, it's probably pretty decent, man. I mean, we've seen cards like this, Reckless Impulse and stuff, Rin's Resolve, Be Good, in the very recent past, right? In multiple formats. So I wouldn't be surprised to see this go back multiple formats. It's not quite the same card. Not quite, right? Because if you play it during your turn, you only get until the end of that turn to play the cards. Whereas Rin's Resolve and whatnot, they work a little bit differently. Sometimes you get like a full 2-ish turns to play the cards, which is really nice. But I do think even with that slight nerf, this card is still easily one of the top 10 cards so far, like in the set. So we'll have to wait and see when we actually end up doing the top, whatever it's going to be, whether or not I feel the same way. But this does immediately look like an incredibly powerful Magic card. But you know what? So does Mosswood Dread Knight. This is 1 and a green for a 3/2 human knight with trample. And when it dies, you may cast it from your graveyard as an adventure until the end of your next turn. That's how you do it right there. And the adventure half is Dread Whispers. It's 1 and a black for a sorcery. You draw a card and you lose 1 life. This card is pushed. There are a couple of cards that you might want to play instead is the only issue I have with this, right? You might want to play Tenacious Underdog instead. So somewhat similar cards, obviously. You might even want to play like Razor Lash Transmogrant, I guess. Like there's options over this card, but I do think this is a super cool, grindy little signpost for any green-black X even. Mid-range decks. In the upcoming standard, 2 mana for a 3/2 trample is a fine stat line. It can come back, and when it does, you draw a card. Like, it's sorcery speed. You have to invest the mana to bring it back too, which might trip you up in terms of your game plan. So I'm not saying this card is always going to be incredible. And once you miss the chance to cast it as an adventure, it's just kind of in your graveyard. Doesn't mean you'll never see it again, but it's just kind of there. I don't know, man. This keeps coming back and keeps drawing your cards when it does so, even though it's a pretty penny to keep casting. But I think it's going to be worth it in a lot of games. Just really, really good card here. I don't think that's too debatable. But that is it for today. Just perform the reload on all the spoiler sites. Don't see anything new. So I think that's all for this one. But there are more cards left in this set. Not a whole lot. I think we're actually pretty close here to the end. But that doesn't mean we're going to be done. We got like best of the rest. We might do one of those. We got to get on Twitch and review every single card in the set in a speed run. That's always a lot of fun for you. And admittedly some fun for me too, despite what I'm putting myself through. I still like it. I wouldn't do it if I didn't. But anyway, we got a lot more spoiler content, not to mention top 10 sleepers, decks from the new set and all that. So a bunch to get into. Make sure you subscribe for all the content that is yet to come. And once we get to like deck tech season and all that, those are the good videos, honestly. This is just me like running my mouth. And honestly, that's what deck techs are too, but you get a bid every now and again. So that's, I guess it's slightly technically better, right? But anyway, do all the stuff. Check me out on Twitch. Go to the Patreon if you want to support the channel. It's the only thing really keeping the channel alive at this point. AdSense is not great. So check me out over there if you want to help lift me up and keep me doing this. It would really mean a lot. And for just $1 a month, you get to vote on what decks we do when we go into Wilds of Eldraine and beyond. So help me out there if you feel like it. If you don't, that's fine. I'm just glad that you're here. Let's check out the couch card of the day. We're going to pull 2 today, because for the first time since we started doing this, I just forgot to do the couch card yesterday. Just completely slipped my mind, which is fine because it was already an overly long video, much like this one. But what do we get? We'll do one from the... Whoa. Mike just fell over. We'll do one from the left side of the couch. I'm not going to look. What is it? Shuffle, shuffle. There it is. Okay. So it's not great. We got an Ancient Den. I guess you could argue this is fine. Ancient Den, just an artifact land that taps for white. Just artifact land taps for white. Good. In affinity, I guess. But what do we get from the right side of the couch? That was an easy one. What do we get from the right side of the couch? Let me get up under here and pull this middle card. I'm sorry, guys. Bad pull. We got a bad pull. It's Cinderheart Giant. What the hell is Cinderheart Giant? I don't even really know. It's 7 mana, 5 and 2 red for a 7/6 Giant Berserker with trample. When it dies, it deals 7 damage to a creature an opponent controls chosen at random. Why is this card on the couch? It isn't very good at all, in fact. But that's all the spoilers and couch cards today. Maybe we'll nab something really sweet tomorrow. I see a Pendlehaven right there. There's a Proxy Black Lotus that looks like an actual Black Lotus, but it's not. If it were just sitting on my couch, that would be crazy. There's a Black Vice right there. There's stuff to pull. There's an Urza Saga Mountain. That would have been better than either of the cards we pulled. But anyway, that's all. Hi, that's all we've got for this one. So just do all the YouTube stuff, and I'll catch you cats later. Let me know how you felt about everything down there in the comments section. What are your favorite cards from the set? We're rounding the corner. We're going home. We're about to be there. But again, there are a few more cards. So hang out with us during spoiler season. We'll finish it up. But that's all I got for this one. So thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.